short 7 minutes that I have. And it all begins when I was about 5 years old. I was laying down in my bed at night and it was dark. And you know how when you have your window open and you can see the silhouette of the tree on the wall? Well, I was looking at that silhouette and I was frightful. I was scared. And I started praying in my mind, because at this point I was an Adventist, I was raised an Adventist. I was scared and I cried out to God, and the next thing I knew, I seen two outlines of two beings above my bed. No joke. And I felt this peace come over me. And that's probably one of the earliest experiences that I can remember that I had with God. From that point forward, I would actually ask my mother how I could hear the voice of God at a young age. And she'd say, "Oh, honey, just hush your voice and listen very carefully." And I started doing that. Every now and then I would stop to hear God's voice, and you know what? He actually, every now and then, would, in a whisper, say, "Winston." Now that seems a little odd, but at the time that's all I had when I was younger, because even growing up in an Adventist home, we didn't really study the Bible, or we just went to church, and I didn't know the significance of what it meant to be a Christian. What's interesting is that my personal experience with God was not in the church. My personal experience with God was not in the church. It wasn't through my parents, per se, but it was by a series of events growing up where I would cry out to God. Another one of those events I remember very clearly is when I was in junior high. At this point, I wasn't going to school very often, to church. I wasn't going to church very often, and I was working one day, and I cried out to God because I really hated the job that I was working at. And it was as if someone had plugged a USB stick into my mind, and I got all of these ideas of how to start a business. And I felt like, wow, this is God. Like, this is how God works in people's lives, you know? And I'm just like, I'm praising God, and here I am, still living in the world, smoking, drinking, doing all that carousing. But yet, I have somewhat of a relationship with God. Maybe that might change a perspective of people in the world as well. There's a lot of people out there that are simply doing things by virtue of other people. They really want to do what's good in life, or they might, seek God in a personal relationship with Him, but they just don't know any other way, and I would consider myself in that category. And so, it wasn't until the summer of 2008 that I gave my heart to God, and it was because I cried out to Him once again. And don't we see that in the Scriptures? We see that whenever someone cries out to God in humility and with a contrite heart, that He answers them. And right away, what we see is a God of pursuit, of long-suffering, of understanding. And that's the God that I knew before I completely committed my life to Him. It was the first time that I was back in church, and I sat down, in the back seat, so no one would know it was me, even though I grew up in that church and everyone knew it was me. And I was a little ashamed to be back, and I looked over my shoulder, and I seen a guy with thick glasses on. He looked like a lawyer. And then after the service, I went and introduced myself to him, and it just so happened that he was a lawyer. He was an ex-lawyer. His name is Dave Stewart. He works with Amazing Facts right now as an evangelist. Well, one thing led to another, and he actually offered Bible studies. And, at the time I was a little bit reluctant, but I just had to step out in faith, because I had a lot of pressure from outside, from friends and so on and so forth, but I wanted to do the right thing. So we sat down and we started studying, and I started seeing the Adventist message like I've never seen it before. Prior to this time, the only thing I knew was that there was a God up there that answered my prayers, and every now and then I had these amazing ecstatic experiences, and He warmed my heart, and He filled that void that was there. And so now the theology is coming in. Now the basis for my faith is being established, and I'm starting to see it for the first time in my life, the 300's message. And so it's quite amazing, and I kind of had a little bit of resentment in my heart because could you imagine growing up in an Adventist home and yet you still don't know what the 300's message is? Like that kind of seems unheard of, but once again, I think that gives us a perspective of people that are in the church. We need to be teaching and preaching this message a little bit more clear, maybe more personal interaction. Anyhow, so after that, I actually went to Africa because he recommended that I go. And for the first time in my life, I came down to America. I'm from Grand Prairie, Canada, by the way. All of you know that, right? Yeah. I've got a couple of Canadians in here. And so my whole paradigm, my whole life switched upside down. Not just because here I am accepting a message and now I'm spiritual and so on and so forth, but because the things in my life that needed reconciling started to be mended because of Jesus, the Messiah. I noticed that I had a very critical mindset, and I kind of felt bad for that and guilty. He helped me with that. I had a bad relationship with my father and had bitterness in my heart. He helped me with that as well. There were certain personal things that I had, the issues that we have with ourselves that you might be able to relate with. These things Jesus met through the gospel, and I had a purpose and I had a reason to live. And so I was a Bible worker after 2008. What's my time? Because I forgot to look at it. And after 2008.
You're at 6:54.
All right. And here I am at Weimar, a year later. And I have a whole other testimony. What I realize is this, though. You don't go through a conversion experience just once. There's more. Conversion experience it multiplies. It's a lifetime thing. All right. If you haven't given your heart to Jesus, or if maybe you feel like you need to refresh that experience with Him, I want to encourage you to do today, because without doing that, I wouldn't be standing